Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and for some reason I'm filming today when it is 28 degrees. So if I am looking rather hot and bothered, please do excuse. There is also a fly somewhere in this room that I couldn't capture. So let's just think of this insect as a fly that wants some book recommendations too, and if you see him flying around, that's why he's here. Cool. Okay, so today I want to catch you up on all the books that I've been reading this year. I did a wrap up at the end of February, so we won't talk about the books I read before then because I've already done that. And since then I've done a few reading vlogs where I read the Women's Prize for Fiction long list, all of the books. I read some of the International Booker Prize long list, and I also did a vlog where I read other booktubers' favourite books. But I want to talk to you about all of the other books that I have been reading too. I am actually surprised with how much I have read this year. I just checked my story graph, and so far this year I have read 59 books, which is 79, it is not 79,000, it is 17,251 pages, which is already more than I read last year, all of last year. And I guess that's not surprising. I had a baby last year, but I still have a baby now. That's why I'm surprised. I think I probably read more at the beginning part of the year when sleep was particularly bad. It is better now, and audiobooks were keeping me company during that period, but they're still keeping me company now. So I would love to talk to you about the books that I have been reading. I should also say, just because if you've been here a while, you may remember me talk about this in previous videos, I do review work for a project called Inclusive Books for Children. Those books are not part of these stats. So normally I chronicle on Storygraph, I record, catalogue all of the books that I've been reading, but this year I decided I wouldn't catalogue the books that I'm reading for work. So the 59 books are books that I have specifically chosen to read myself. But yeah, the books are scattered around me. It looks a little chaotic. I also want to talk to you about the books that I have bought since I last checked in with you. I have only bought and not read one book, which is pretty good. Pretty good going for me. I have a couple of review copies to show you, and I have bought a few more books, but I've read them, so we can wrap those up. I love to do a deep dive into books, do some literary criticism and all of that good stuff. That is not what this video today is going to be. It is going to be a whistle-stop tour of all the books that I have been reading. Would I recommend them? What do I remember about them? Would I say maybe don't bother? Pull up a seat, grab a cup of tea, or maybe a glass of ice water if you're also overheating like me, and let's talk about some books. Having said that the books that I catalogue are not Inclusive Books for Children books, I just wanted to shout out one of those books in particular, which actually I think is a book I read last year, but I couldn't talk about it because I was one of the judges for the Inclusive Books for Children Awards, which were announced in February. There were 3 different categories, and this was the winner of our chapter book category for early readers, and I just think it's so brilliant. So if you're looking for something for young people in your life, I'd recommend this, which is Destiny Inc. by Adeola Sukumbi, and this is about a very anxious young girl. Destiny has been invited to a sleepover, but she's never been to a sleepover before, and she's just overthinking everything in her brain. And then one evening a monster appears in her bedroom and gives her some coping strategies, and I just thought I would have loved this so much as a kid, as an anxious little bean myself. So yes, would recommend that for, you know, 6-7-year-olds in your life. Then a book that really disappointed me, so I won't dwell on it for too long, but this is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fito. Her book, Mrs. March, was my favourite book of the year in 2022, I think was the year that I read it. Absolutely amazing. In fact, this year and last year over on Patreon, we have been rereading some of my favourite books, and that has been such a fun thing. And this summer we are rereading Mrs. March, and I'm really looking forward to it. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and like many people, having discussed it with people over on Patreon who were also highly anticipating this was just not the one. So this is about a woman who is hired as a governess. It is inspired by Turn of the Screw, and I have read other books inspired by Turn of the Screw which I have enjoyed much more, like John Harding's book Florence and Giles, which is delectably creepy. At least I remember it being so. I read it more than 10 years ago now. But yeah, this one is about a governess who is looking after some children, and she really enjoys hurting people. And it's one of those books where you can see the author pulling all of the strings and how they're deliberately trying to gross you out and make you go, ugh, instead of immersing you in the story. That is the overall feeling that I was left with. It didn't impress me very much, not to quote Shania Twain. And I would say if you were looking for a book like that instead, not the governess bit, but a revenge story of a woman who has been wronged, I would very much recommend The Butcher's Hook by Janet Ellis. That is a historical fiction novel that I think ticks all of the right boxes, so I would go there instead. Then I read Crooked Cross by Sally Carson, which was this year's most anticipated Persephone Classics book. So Persephone Books, they're a wonderful company. They have a publishing house and a bookshop in Bath now. It used to be in London, but alas, it has now gone to Bath. And all the people of Bath are very lucky to have them. They publish lost and forgotten classics, mainly written by women. This was written in 1933, and it is about a family growing up in Germany. And I would pitch it as the TV show Years and Years, but set in Germany. So Sally Carson was writing about what she thought was going to happen with the rise of Nazism. And it is so bizarre to be reading a book that is predicting things and predicting them correctly. And I really feel like in the current political climate, this is a book that speaks to us. And I really enjoyed reading this one. There are 2 sequels that were published as well, and I believe that Persephone Books are publishing those too, so I look forward to reading those as well. Next, I have been reading this anthology for a year and I've just finished it. This is We've Got This, Essays by Disabled Parents, and it's edited by Eliza Hull. As a disabled parent myself, I was super keen to read this book. As the title would suggest, it is a collection of essays about disabled parents and their experiences of parenting. I don't know how to sell it to you more than that, so I won't. But if that sounds like a book that you would like reading, then maybe you would like to check it out. Pizza Girl by Jen Campbell was a delight. I listened to this one and I listened to it after reading Victorian Psycho. And this was everything I wanted Victorian Psycho to be, which sounds bizarre because this is not historical fiction. But it is about a troubled woman who is very lost, and it's very understated, this book. It just really got under my skin. It's about a teenage girl who's working in a pizza joint as a delivery girl, and then she discovers that she is pregnant, and then she becomes really obsessed with one of the women who she delivers pizza to. And that's kind of all the blurb says, to be honest, and I don't want to say more than that because it's not a plot-heavy book, though things do happen in it. It's more about the atmosphere, and I feel like it slowly drags you into their lives and you don't realise how invested you are until something quite shocking happens, and then you think, oh my goodness, no. What? No, I care about these people deeply, please stop. All of the characters in this book are these little islands, and they're not telling each other things, and they're not communicating properly, and you want to shake them and hug them at the same time. I thought it was really great. Another really great book was this one, which is Hum by Helen Phillips. This was, again, one of my most anticipated books of the year, but this one did not disappoint. This one is so good. I read her book, The Need, a few years ago, which was deeply unsettling and was also one of my favourite books this year. This one is even better. This is a dystopian book set in a near future world about a main character, a mum who decides that she's going to undergo this new procedure to slightly change her face. The people doing the procedure say it will only be slightly perceptible to people who really know her because it's just almost like a pixel change. Otherwise, everything will be the same for her. But what it means and why she wants to get it done is that facial recognition won't work for her. So she will not be able to verify her identity or have her identity, I guess, used in a way that she doesn't want, because it's a very tech-heavy future that we're looking at, where there are robots, AIs called hums, who are everywhere, and you interact with them all of the time, and they try and tailor their interactions to you, specifically by using facial recognition. And by using that, they then access everything ever online about you, and then they will advertise to you when they're talking to you. So you'll be thinking that you're just having a conversation about, you know, life, every day, the weather, and then suddenly they'll say, you look quite tired. Would you like to order this specific thing? We can have it delivered to your house. It is basically an episode of Black Mirror, especially like the first episode of the latest season of Black Mirror, the name of which completely escapes me. But if you have seen it, you will know what I mean. The kind of horrifying future that feels very much like the life that we are living now, if you just tweaked it ever so slightly. Her kids wear wristbands with bunnies, which are like Tamagotchis, they're holograms that they speak to all the time, and they speak to these Tamagotchis instead of speaking to their parents. Everyone has a womb that exists in their bedroom, which is like a gigantic egg that you sit in, and it is a physical embodiment of the bubble you are in when you are on your phone. Yes, so I thought about this book just constantly. Gave me the creeps, gave me the shivers in the best way possible. I would highly recommend it for fans of Leila Lalami's The Dream Hotel. I read that before reading this and was strongly reminded of those particular feelings, vibes. So if you're looking for something like that, then this is the one for you. Then, as I said, I read all of the Women's Prize books in March. I read them in March. These are the 6 shortlisted books. If you would like to watch a video where I talk about all 16 longlisted books, I will put that in the description box down below. But I also wrote an article for Toast where I reviewed the 6 shortlisted books. The winner, if you're not aware, is The Safekeep by E.L. van der Woerden, and her speech was so wonderful. I'll link that in the description box down below as well. But I reviewed the shortlist for Toast. I will link that article in the description box if you would prefer to read my reviews instead of watching the video. And Toast are doing a giveaway of the 6 shortlisted books too. So if you want to enter that, you can head over to that article. Then I read the International Booker Prize longlist, some of them, and I will link that vlog in the description box down below in case you're wondering. Spoilers, my favourite I think was Under the Eye of the Big Bird by Hiromi Kawakami, which again, like Hum, is well, this one's like a magical dystopian book with folklore elements, which you know is just my cup of tea, but you can find out more by going to that specific video. Then over on Patreon Book Club, as I said, we have been revisiting some of my favourite books. Patreon, if you're not familiar, is a place where you can support creators whose work you enjoy, and there are a few extra things over there. So there is a book club. I do monthly bookish conundrums. There are behind the scenes writing chats, video chats, lots of stuff. So we'll link that in the description box down below. If you happen to be interested, it's £1/$1 a month. The book club you can take part in if you want, if the mood takes you, runs every season. So normally there are only 4 books we read a year, but I got overexcited and we had a few extra book club reads this year, which I have thoroughly enjoyed. We read or reread, in my case, The Accidental by Ali Smith. This was the first Ali Smith book I ever read back at university, and it was really fun to revisit it, and actually revisiting it and seeing how this really influenced my early writing was quite funny and confronting and humbling. So this is about a woman called Amber who represents storytelling and narrative, and she infiltrates this family's life. She shows up at their holiday home and none of the family members communicate with each other properly, so each member of the family thinks that Amber must be a friend of their mother or their father or their sister, and a book just fell on the floor, and that's where it goes. She engages with each of them individually and tries to help them as a therapist, as a friend, but also as a forward plot moving storytelling device, because as I said, that is what she is. She is narrative, she is cinema, she is storytelling, and there are so many things to unpick when it comes to imagery in this, and I talked about that more over on Patreon. I also reread Under the Skin by Michelle Faber, and I have now upped this to my favourite Michelle Faber book. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that I read this the same year that I read either The Crimson Petal and the White or Under the Skin. And when I did my favourite books of the year video, I thought, I can't have 2 books by the same author on this list, so I chose one of the other 2 instead. And that's slightly perplexing to me, having now revisited this, because I think this is so darn good. And I'm going to speak more about this in my favourite books of the year so far video, because normally I don't talk about rereads, because well, there's just so many books to talk about, but I feel this one deserves it. It deserves an extra shout out, so let's talk about that more next time. I also thoroughly enjoyed revisiting English Animals by Laura Kay. I was a bit apprehensive about revisiting this one because I used to love it so much and I wasn't sure it would hold up, and it absolutely did. Laura is also a filmmaker, and the way this is written feels very cinematic. You can picture everything. It is about a woman called Mirka who goes to work at this country estate, and she thinks she's being hired as a nanny, but when she gets there she realizes there's been some kind of confusion, and Richard and Sophie, who own the house, don't have any kids. She's there to help run their wedding business. They have people come to stay at the estate, and also she's asked to do some taxidermy for them on the side. This is all about xenophobia. It's also a queer love story, and it is about the difference between humans and the way they treat animals and animalistic behaviour within humans, and all of that imagery was just so wonderful to revisit. I think I loved it even more. Also, I had forgotten how tense the ending was. I don't normally forget books after I have read them, with a few exceptions, which we'll get to in a second. But I really had forgotten like a big element of the ending, in a good way, because it meant that it shocked me when I read it the second time. So yes, another thumbs up from me. And then the book that fell on the floor, which I'm not going to reach down and pick up, I will instead insert the cover here because otherwise I will knock other books onto the floor, not being lazy, was Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller, which I was even more nervous to revisit because I read this one pre-Booktube, and this one was also so good. I have not reread the book before, but I have watched the film several times with Cate Blanchett and Judi Dench, and it was really interesting also to revisit it having watched the Apple TV series with Cate Blanchett. The name escapes me, I will put it on the screen, but the storylines are kind of similar and she plays a similar character, and I think, well, I wonder if she was cast in that role because of her role in Notes in a Scandal, even though that was quite some time ago. Anyway, this is a book that's told in diary format by a woman called Barb, who is an older woman who works as a teacher in a secondary school in North London, and a younger teacher starts there and she becomes completely obsessed with her. I have said so many times on this channel that I am looking for other books that give me that Notes on a Scandal feeling. Pet by Catherine Chidgey ended up being one of those books. And yeah, I mean, really what I should have just done when I was saying I wanted a book like Notes on a Scandal was reread Notes on a Scandal. So it's about how Barb ends up manipulating this new teacher, blackmailing her, and also because it's written in diary format, you're never quite sure when she's telling the truth. So good. If you enjoy Patricia Highsmith, you will love Notes on a Scandal. Then I read this, which is a book that I edited, so I have read it plenty of times before, but always with an editing hat on, with a deadline in mind, and I wanted to read it again because this came out in April. I wanted to reread it in my own time. I also listened to it because we all did the audiobook together, which was wonderful. This is a collection of, well, not essays. I keep saying that they're essays. I think that makes it sound a bit academic. They're not essays. They are stories, but real stories by disabled writers who were once also disabled children, speaking about their childhoods, their hospital experiences, their school life, their families, you know, memories of joy and ableism. Some are happy, some are sad, some are really, really funny. And I loved putting this book together with James and Lucy Catchpole. So proud that it's published by Faber, illustrated by Sophie Camlish. If you haven't checked it out, I would love you to. It is primarily for middle grade, so that is 8 to 13-year-olds, but I would say it is for anybody and everybody. So yes, I will link this in the description box down below as well. Now, I would like to normalise reading books and not having that much to say about them, because that happens to be life. Yes, I review books as my job, but sometimes in, you know, my ordinary day-to-day life, I read books and I just think, well, that was all right, but I don't have much to say about that. So let me just tell you about those. I read Companion Piece by Ali Smith, which is the companion novel to her seasonal quartet. I had a lovely time. There was lots of wordplay, but it hasn't particularly stayed with me. I read Hard Copy by Fien Veldman, which is translated from the Dutch by Hester Velmans, and this one I didn't particularly enjoy. It's about a woman who falls in love with her printer, and I liked all of the bureaucratic nonsense that was talked about. For instance, there's one point where she's trying to locate a parcel which has apparently been delivered but hasn't been delivered, so she's going all around all of the local houses, and it's very farcical and silly. I enjoyed that. I didn't really enjoy the bit that was narrated by the printer, and overall didn't care for it that much. And then these two books I DNF'd. This is Another Person by Kang Hwa-gil, which is translated from the Korean by Claire Richards. I asked for a review copy of this because I really enjoyed a pamphlet that she wrote for Strangers Press as part of their Korean series, but didn't like this one. And this is Concerning My Daughter by Kim Hee-jin, which is translated from the Korean by Jamie Chang. And this one I also just was quite bored by. Didn't enjoy this one very much, so I also put this one down. Then there are a couple of books that I read that I do not have physical copies of anymore. I spoke about some of them in the Reading Other Booktubers' Favourite Books video, so I won't talk about those. In fact, maybe there's only one then, aside from the ones I've spoken about, that I don't have a physical copy of. Yes, so that is All the Other Mothers Hate Me by Sarah Harmon, which is a bit of a ridiculous thriller about a woman who isn't a great mum. She often goes out at night and just leaves her kid at home asleep, and another kid in his class goes missing. She finds some evidence of that boy in her son's bedroom, so she decides to try and investigate. She is a failed 90s pop star, and it just sounded like it could be quite fun, but it was very over the top, very unrealistic, and one of those books where you kept reading because you really wanted to know what happened, but the payoff wasn't particularly worth it. Hi, sorry, I had to stop filming because my daughter woke up from her nap. It is 6:30 the next morning. Thank goodness for summer morning light, which means I can finish this video while she plays with my husband downstairs. You may be able to hear some excited toddler noises in the background. Ambient noises, let's call it that. Okay, now I want to talk to you about two children's books before I get onto a few other books that I still need to review, and then we'll talk about the review copies and one book that I've bought and not yet read. So this is The Circus of Shadows by Lydia Brankovic, and I was so excited when I saw this in the window of our local shop because I read her book The Grand Hotel of Feelings last year and just loved it, thought it was brilliant. It was on my best books of the year list. That was a picture book about what was essentially like Wes Anderson meets Spirited Away. It was a hotel where feelings could go and stay, and you had to house them and look after them in certain ways in order to nurture them and enable them to grow and feel good and then leave again. It's about teaching children how feelings don't always stay forever, and how we've got to look after ourselves. It's a great way to introduce them to talk about emotions, along with a book called What Feelings Do When No One's Looking. I think that's what it's called. I'll insert the cover here. I also love that one. Anyway, was really excited to see this one. This one is a similar concept. So this is about how we all have shadows that live inside us, and sometimes these shadows grow and get bigger, and if we don't acknowledge them and engage with them, then that's not very healthy for us. But it's told in a very fantastical way, and I just thought it was very, very moving. So the main character is invited to go to the Circus of Shadows, where her shadow puts on a performance and shows her that actually she can be lots of fun if she will only choose to engage with her properly. But it's also kind of creepy as well, and I think really captures that feeling of overwhelm and anxiety. And again, another great one for kids and adults alike. The next one was a reread for me. I have had this one on my shelf since maybe 2014, and I read it back then. And I remember enjoying it, but definitely preferring the illustrations and the colours over the writing. And I find myself thinking about this book a lot. I don't really know why, but I decided to revisit it. And I have similar feelings about the reread, but I maybe added appreciation for it. I think the concept is there, but the writing style is maybe not to my particular taste. But can we just have a moment for the colour palette in this book? I mean, I just want to take pages out of this book and put them on my wall. It is, I think, like the most gorgeous book I own when it comes to illustration and colour palette. It's just absolutely stunning. So this is about a young boy who goes to stay with his grandfather, and his grandfather has 9 grandfather clocks, which he keeps wound up very specifically. And then one evening, the boy sees his granddad go inside one of the grandfather clocks, and he decides to investigate, and he finds all of these magical things inside. It is a creation myth story, but it's also kind of about climate crisis as well, which I don't think I thought about so much when I read it the first time, but in current times, it's definitely what I ended up thinking about. But yeah, the passage of time, connections between humans and nature, greed, want, hectically trying to find solutions to huge climate problems. I think there's a lot to think about with this book, and I enjoyed that aspect of it, even though, as I said, the writing on a sentence-based level isn't particularly there for me. Doesn't matter when the illustrations are as gorgeous as that. Well, I mean, it kind of matters, but it matters less. Then, do excuse. I mean, I decided to reread the Freda Klein series by Nikki French. Yes, there we go. All 8 books here. In fact, I say all 8. I'm currently halfway through number 6, Saturday. So it starts with Blue Monday and goes all the way through the days of the week, and then the last book is called Day of the Dead. This, I don't know what number this reread is, but I haven't reread them for 2 or 3 years. I think 3 years actually, and I've had such a great time. I know I've spoken about these books so many times on this channel before, so I won't dwell on the specifics of the books, but I kind of wanted to reflect on why I love them so much. So this is a series of crime thriller books by Nikki French. Nikki French is a husband and wife writing duo, Nikki Gerard and Sean French. And they write most of their crime novels set in North London, and I guess I like that a lot because I know North London very well. So there's always lots of things to like pick out and notice. You know, there's lots of references to Hampstead Heath, and you know that I spend a lot of time on Hampstead Heath. Things like that I particularly enjoy. But I was sent a review copy of their book, The Lying Room, back in 2019. And I took that on, not holiday, but when I was working. I was working in Sweden and in Denmark. I was on book tour, and I read The Lying Room on the train from Stockholm to Copenhagen. So it was like a 5-hour train ride, and I read the entire book on that train ride between book events, and I had a really great time. And I thought, I don't read enough crime thrillers, I should read more. And from Copenhagen I went to Edinburgh to do a couple of book events. Back in the days when I used to go places and do work events in person, my goodness. So I went to, I think it was Waterstones on Princes Street. It was the nearest shop to where I was going to be. I used to live in Edinburgh and know all of the independent bookshops and love them dearly, but I just did not have time on that particular trip. I was like, must go into this space before hopping on a train. And I picked out a couple of crime books because I was hooked and wanted to read more crime. They ended up not being very good. Crime is such a tricky genre. I find it especially tricky because there are lots of tropey things in there that I don't particularly like, especially when it comes to disfigurement and disability and villainy. And that is hard to navigate because you don't know when those are going to appear in books. So I decided that I would go back to Nikki French because I had enjoyed that book so much. I don't know why I didn't just buy more books from them from that shop. Anyway, I decided I would listen to an audiobook because from Edinburgh I went on holiday with my husband to the Isle of Arran, and we were there for a week and there were no bookshops nearby, so I decided to listen to an audiobook. And I thought it would be nice to get into a series, so I downloaded the first audiobook in the only series that Nikki French had done at that time. They're currently writing another one, and I listened to Blue Monday. We were going hiking every day. My body was so sore. I have arthritis, so every morning I would be sitting in a very hot bath to try and get my joints and everything to work again, and was in quite a lot of pain. And that book kept me company so much, and I fell in love with it. And then over the course of that autumn winter, I listened to all of the 8 books. I listened to them while I was on book tour for Franklin and Luna and the Book of Fairy Tales, which is the third book in my Franklin and Luna trilogy, illustrated by Katie Harnett. And we were going to lots of different bookshops and festivals, and those books kept me company. It was also the year that I started seeing a therapist, and this series of books is about a psychotherapist called Freda Klein who gets involved in police investigations. And the thing that I love about it is that you get to learn about her friends and her family, a huge cast of characters that you come to deeply care about. In fact, you find out a lot about Freda's past in book 4, so that's really, you know, a far way into the series, and by that point you're so invested that when you find out about her past, it breaks your heart a lot. But yes, as I was saying, it was the first year that I was seeing a therapist, and I'm sure that played a role in enjoying these books because I was thinking a lot about therapy at that time. Anyway, that's why I love these books so much. They are narrated by Beth Chalmers, and Freda is a complicated character, and her friends obviously sometimes do things that are frustrating and annoying because it's a novel series and people need to make bad decisions in order to further the plot. But I love them. I love them. So if you haven't taken me up on that recommendation before and that has tempted you, then there you are. So those are all the books that I've read. Let me now talk about the books that I have on my TBR. Well, I say TBR. These are the books that I have requested for review or have bought recently. Let's start with the only one I have bought, and it's this one here, which is another Helen Phillips book. As soon as I finished reading Hum, I thought, I need more of this, please. So I bought her book, The Beautiful Bureaucrat. I'm not sure if this is her debut. It may be. This was published in 2017. So I think this is about bureaucracy, and all of her books deal with that in some form. This one is about a woman who gets a job in a remote part of town, and she doesn't particularly want to work there, but she does. And then it says, when one evening her husband Joseph disappears and then returns, offering no explanation as to his whereabouts, her creeping unease soon turns to dread. It's part modern fairy tale, part existentialist thriller. This is a breathtaking joyride of a novel that asks the biggest questions about marriage and fidelity, birth and death. And having read Hum, I have so much faith in this book and I'm very excited. And next, funny story with this one. So when I read the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist, I knew the prize were going to be sending me all of the longlisted books. And in the past, that has happened in a couple of different ways. Sometimes all of the books have arrived in one box sent directly from the prize, and sometimes they've arrived separately from the publishers with no note saying this is a Women's Prize longlisted book. So I was waiting for these books to arrive, wasn't expecting anything else to be landing on my doormat. So when this one landed on my doorstep, I thought this was one of the Women's Prize longlisted books, and then it turned out that was not the case. So I then put it back on the shelf. But for a fair few days there, I thought this was one of those prize books. Never mind. So this is Calls May Be Recorded for Training and Monitoring Purposes. This was an unsolicited book that was sent to me, and I don't accept those normally, but this one does sound right up my street. It's by Katharina Volkmar, and it says, in a London call centre, Jimmy helps holidaymakers with a myriad of problems, but he is hardly a model employee. He doesn't simply provide customer service to his clients and advice to his colleagues. He gets involved in their fantasies and frustrations, and now he's about to be hauled in front of the boss. I don't want to know more than that. I am really interested and have been recently just interested in workplace novels. Haven't always loved the ones that I have been reading, but I hope that this is one that I will end up adoring. Oh, this is a book that I am part of, and I am so thrilled that it exists. This is an anthology that has just been published by Blood Axe. This is Verses, 100 Poems by Deaf, Disabled and Neurodivergent Poets, and it's edited by Rachel Boast. So I have a poem in here, as do poets like Raymond Antrobus and Hannah Hodgson, and this is such a brilliant resource for discovering more disabled poets that you might want to go out and read more from. I haven't read all of this yet myself. I really look forward to doing so. Yes, just so happy this exists. I've read a couple of anthologies of disabled poets in the past, like Stares and Whispers, Deaf and Disabled Poets Write Back, but I'm just glad that there's a new one. We always need more. A book I'm going to get to really soon is Sarah Moss's Ripeness. I think this is a book about motherhood, or at least it touches on family life. I don't want to know about it, which I know is not helpful to you, but I'm flagging there's a new Sarah Moss in case that somehow passed you by. I've read all of her previous books, apart from Signs for Lost Children, I think is the one that I haven't read, but I've read every other book by her. Adore her. This is out now, and I have the audiobook of it, which I look forward to listening to. This is a non-fiction book that I have been sent called Chinese Parents Don't Say I Love You by Candice Chung, a memoir of saying the unsayable with food. I feel like that subheading kind of sums it up, but let me have a quick look at the blurb. I don't want to know too much about it, but the end of the blurb says, set against the backdrop of a burgeoning new relationship, grasped at date nights, mid-pandemic, and an uncertain future across seas, Chinese Parents Don't Say I Love You is packed with heart, humour, and those bright-hearted moments around a dinner table that bring us together. Sounds fab. And then finally, I have 2 Faber editions. There we go. These are what they look like. Faber have this new series where they have reissued forgotten classics, and my favourite from the series so far was Rachel Ingalls' Mrs. Caliban, which I read in 2021 and absolutely adored. This is The Ha Ha by Jennifer Dawson, which is about Josephine entering a mental institution, it says, after the death of her mother. And the other one is Freezing Point by Anders Bodelson, and the back of it says, if you want to live forever, you have to pay for it. I love this cover, and the marketing for this is brilliant, because inside the book is this, which is a leaflet advertising the cryogenic centre, which is the main part of this book. And it's advertising how maybe you want to live forever, etc, etc. Then on the back we've got some disclaimers. It says, disclaimers, we are gambling with you, but it's not entirely chance. Everyone who is down has been sterilised. Since 1982, dead people belong to society, according to the law. You don't own yourself any longer. Society owns you. Had it not been for society, you would not be lying here now. And the final disclaimer is, we have been inclined to overestimate our capabilities. Oh, okay, this sounds so good. I'm very excited to read a classic dystopian novel. Brilliant. So those are all the books that I have read so far, well, since the end of February, apart from the ones that I talked about in the reading vlogs that I mentioned, which are linked in the description box down below. I would love to know if you've read any of these, or would like to, now that you've heard me talk about them. I will link Patreon in the description box down below, which is a place where you can tip creators whose work you enjoy. If you like the videos that I put out and you would like to throw $1 or £1 in the tip jar and join in with the stuff I've got going on over there, like book club, etc., that would be lovely. And I will be back soon with a video where I talk to you about my best books of the year so far. I am sending lots of love to you all, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye.